look at the operation as a whole, they're currently trying to determine how the astronauts will be recovered. That's not happening today.
That's right.
But that will have to be integrated into the operation. Do they come off immediately after the crew splashes down? Or there's an idea kicking around there to have them stay in the capsule and come to the back of the ship. What are your thoughts on both of those? What are the pluses and minuses on those?
Well, certainly the plus of having the crew come off immediately is that the crew is not staying in the capsule for an extended period of time. There'll be a time when we'll have to turn off the cooling in the capsule, which would mean the crew will start getting very warm in their suits. So it's better to get them off before that. Also, you'll probably see later the operations in the well deck. There are a lot of waves in there, and it's probably not going to be a fun ride for the crew to be in there. So you're right, we're looking at it. The actual, let's see, next summer, we're going to have another test run. We'll be out on a ship, and we will be looking at all the different methodologies for getting crew off the capsule.
And may I ask what your particular favorite would be? I mean, I think you've already kind of indicated you're leaning more towards, let's get off the ship.
We're looking at it.
Yeah,
the
so
actual,
I think we will,
let's see, next probably, now don't quote me on this, but we'll probably extract the crew via helicopter from the capsule and helicopter them over to the ship.
And as an astronaut, just briefly, when you come back from space, physically, you're in a condition where, how would you describe it, physically and mentally?
Yeah, so when we come back, we consider a crew deconditioned. While on the space station, for example, we have lots of exercise, so we're really strong when we come back. It is still a big adjustment to being in Earth's gravity again. The lunar missions is kind of in the middle between what we did in the shuttle days and what we're doing on the space station. So we don't know exactly how the crew's going to feel, but they're going to be exhausted, and so their balance may be off a little bit. So it's better just to get them out of the capsule. As far as the mental side goes, I found that when I am back on Earth, it's just a huge sigh of relief in that somebody else is worrying all the details, and I can just sit and relax a little bit.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for all the insight. You're doing a great job of staying balanced amidst the 4 to 5 foot seas as you see the horizon going up and down, right?
It is definitely a challenge.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Rob, we'll send it back to you in Houston.
Thanks, Daryl. Thank you, Shannon, and happy sailing out there as we continue to watch this scintillating view of the Earth, as we are just 1 hour, 5 minutes away from splashdown. Now, as Shannon Walker alluded to in that interview with Daryl Nail on the USS Portland, we're going to be on the air here for a couple of hours after splashdown, while a number of flight objectives and test objectives are being conducted, data gathering on the Orion spacecraft. But the whole recovery issue to get Orion into the well deck of the USS Portland is no small feat. Melissa Jones, who is the landing director and the recovery director from the Kennedy Space Center, has worked tirelessly to choreograph all of the elements of that recovery operation. Let's take a look now at how Orion will be recovered.
Today we are aboard the USS John P. Murtha, and behind me is a mock-up capsule of the Orion crew module, and we are training the team to be ready to do Artemis 1 recovery operations. My role as the NASA recovery director is to lead the interagency team that will recover the capsule. Ever since the Apollo program, NASA and the Navy have worked together to recover NASA's capsules in the water. So one of the huge benefits of working with the Navy is the fact that they're operational, and we leverage their core competencies to bring the flight hardware and the crew back safely from the moon. On the Artemis 1 recovery day, my job will be to direct the team through the integrated operation to recover the capsule. The ship will get to the recovery location 24 hours before, and we will start launching weather balloons. And that data will go back to Houston and will help inform where we splash down. A couple hours before splashdown, the Navy launches small boats off of the knuckle boom crane, and helicopters will take off, and they will do their circles in the air, and they are waiting for the capsule to re-enter so that they can get good data and photo imagery of the capsule on its way back to Earth. Once that is done and we splash down, we will safe the capsule, approach the capsule, attach lines to the capsule, and recover it into the well deck of the ship. Artemis 1 recovery operations will take about 5 hours to perform all of the work we need to do, because we are gathering data so that we can fly crew mission on Artemis 2. When Artemis 1 splashes down, it's going to be the culmination of all of the hard work that we've put in as a team. It's going to be an amazing feeling, hearing that we've met Earth's interface and that we can see 3 good main parachutes. And when we hear splashdown, I'm going to get goosebumps all over me.
And again, that whole recovery operation will take several hours. We are going to remain on the air for at least 2 hours or so after splashdown, so that we can bring you all the information regarding the initial safing of the vehicle and the test objectives that the flight control team here in Houston, led by Flight Director Judd Freeling, will be absorbing all of that data, mostly about the thermal conditions of the spacecraft, which will have come through some 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit in entry. And with us at this moment is the man who is going to be watching all of that very, very carefully, John Kowal, who's the Orion Thermal Protection System Manager. John, your big moment is lying ahead here. The plunge back into the Earth's atmosphere. This is the moment of truth to test the heat shield. What kind of thermal environment are you expecting for Orion as it makes its way into the Earth's atmosphere and then back through the atmosphere itself?
Yeah, so, as you mentioned, 5,000 degrees on the ship, but to back that up, how do we get there? So that vehicle still has all that energy that the launch rocket put into it during that first beautiful launch, right? So that gets converted into velocity. So we're going at 25,000 miles per hour, which is, how do you even fathom what that means? It's 7 miles per second. Wow. So all that energy, enough to power 4,000, 5,000 homes in a day, we have to get rid of it. And how do we do that? The vehicle comes slamming into the atmosphere, starts trying to push the air out of the way. That air is pushing back. The pressures go up. The temperatures go up. We're talking upwards of around 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the flow field. So that energy goes into the flow field, and then the flow field wants to give it back to the surface of the TPS. So that's what the TPS is going to see, or what the heat shield is going to see, and that's what pushes it up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
What kind of testing was required throughout the course of the preparations for Orion to prepare the vehicle for launch that made you confident that it could withstand the rigors of this sort of environment?
Yeah, there's been a lot of testing. I mean, we've been at this for since the end of the shuttle program. If you think back to that system, that was a reusable system, we had kind of been out of the business of these ablation materials for quite a while, since Apollo. So we had to train a whole new generation of engineers on developing that type of system, as well as getting the materials back. So there was a lot of testing in arc jets. That's the primary way that you test these types of materials. You can create these temperatures. It's like a wind tunnel with a lightning bolt going down the center of it, and that's how you create this high temperature plasma, and that gets impinged onto the test article. So we do a lot of materials testing. We've done quite a bit of testing of the system. Even though we're using the same material, the AVCoat that they used in Apollo, it's in a different form. And so we made it into blocks. Those blocks have seams that have to be filled. Those seams are always one of the areas that you want to test the most, is because that's where the problems happen. And so we've done a lot of testing there in the thermal. And also structurally, we've had to do a lot of testing to see how the AVCoat blocks interact with the structure underneath, and make sure that it's all going to hold up to those loads.
And John, it's about 11 minutes or so from the time of entry interface at an altitude of about 400,000 feet until we come out of that second blackout period. So that's going to be a very interesting time, a sort of a nail-biting time, if you will. But after the vehicle splashes down and is back at the Kennedy Space Center in a few weeks for post-flight analysis, what are the sorts of things that you and your engineering team will be looking for to give it a passing grade in preparation for putting a crew on board a couple of years from now?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we look at. I break it into two different categories. The first is the flight data. We have instrumentation embedded in the heat shield at a number of locations. So we measure temperatures, we measure heat rates, we measure pressures, stresses. All that data will tell us how the material actually performed in that flight environment. It will also help us to inform our computer modeling methods, and that's another thing that we need to make sure that it's performing how we thought it was going to perform, so that we can use those models in the future, to predict for other missions. Now, the other thing we'll do is we'll be looking at the hardware itself. The instrumentation, you only get measurements where you put that instrument, of course, right? But looking at the heat shield, just looking at it, the big picture, you can see the streamlines, you can see how the flow was going across the heat shield, you can see where boundary layer transition may have occurred. So there's so much to just visually see, and then we'll be taking samples of the heat shield, we'll be taking that material out and looking at how much had ablated, looking at the char thickness, the density gradients as you go through as the material burned off, and comparing that to what our models have predicted. And again, that'll help us to be able to validate and correlate our models further.
Very good. It's going to be a very important time for the engineers, of course, and we'll see how Orion fares here in the next hour or so. John Kowal, Orion's Thermal Protection System Manager, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Sure. Thank you.
Now just 16.5 minutes away from the separation of the crew module from the European service module. That will begin a trip hammer series of events as Orion begins the process of entering the Earth's atmosphere. Entry interface just 36 minutes away. So let's go back out to the Pacific Ocean west of Baja, where Daryl is on the USS Portland. Daryl?
That's right, Rob. Quick update for you on out here in the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of Mexico. We have the small boats, the Navy small boats. All 6 boats are now in the water. They call them CRICs. These are Navy boats that are inflatable, highly maneuverable. These are the ones that will actually put hands on the spacecraft in order to secure it and eventually get it tied to lines that brings it to the back of the ship and into the well deck. I want to talk a little bit about this location here today. This location in the Pacific, we're just about 5 miles away from the splashdown area. This was actually the backup location. Initially, this was supposed to happen off the coast of San Diego, California, but the weather forecast for that area called for a cold front that has moved in today, bringing with it 12-foot high seas, and those seas would have been too high to perform this operation, too high for the small boats for recovery. So Recovery Director Melissa Jones and the mission management team made the decision to back up and go to the backup location 300 miles south of San Diego, and that's where we find ourselves today with excellent weather in order to do this operation. As you look off into the sky, we're awaiting the second to last weather balloon release that we will have for the day. This weather data critical to the operation that is happening today, especially when it comes to the landing point of the crew module in the ocean, as well as the debris that goes with it. And that debris happens during the separation of the forward bay cover, which covers the parachutes, and then of course the parachutes and their hardware themselves. All of it together, they take in the winds, and you can feel the winds are picking up a little bit. That wind data will give us refined information and data in order to calculate exactly the landing spot. Now, we're not alone out here in the Pacific Ocean. We do have friends helping us today, and I want to take a shot now of a ship off in the distance that has joined us for today's operation, and that is the USS Montgomery. That ship is just a few miles away. As you can see it there, the USS Montgomery is providing security today. It is what the Navy calls a littoral ship. It specializes in close-to-shore combat. It's highly maneuverable in that space. Today, though, it has a peaceful mission, and that is to provide security to this location during splashdown. So for the public safety, to prevent boats from coming in and around the area, as well as provide additional eyes to the sky in tracking Orion crew module as it comes down. You can see a little bit of a bounce there, and that's caused by the seas that we are currently experiencing, which are in the range of 4 to 5 feet. Those seas closely tracked by our NASA team with a wave management system. They are wave monitoring system rather. They are closely monitoring the seas for the moment where we bring the Orion capsule into the well deck. That is a highly choreographed and very dynamic operation. With the seas being what they are, when those waves come into the well deck, it can create a very dynamic environment with waves splashing back and forth inside the well deck, and teams on ropes trying to stabilize Orion to get it in just the right position here on the ship to then allow the well deck to drain out, have the Orion crew module put in place for its ride back to San Diego. That's the latest from here on the USS Portland out in the Pacific Ocean. Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Daryl. We can report that all of Orion's systems are performing magnificently at this hour. At an altitude of just under 6,000 nautical miles, we did lock up on the tracking and data relay satellite system. So Orion's telemetry is now being processed through the TDRS network. This worked in concert with the Deep Space Network throughout the course of the mission. And now that we're on TDRS the rest of the way, we'll be able to have real-time data through our tracking and data relay satellite system constellation. We're just 11.5 minutes away from crew module, service module separation, the first major milestone on the road home in this final phase of Orion's 25.5-day mission. So let's take a visual and interactive look at what is coming up for Orion's journey back to Earth. Let's go back to NASA's Philip Hargrove at the moon board.
Thank you. Welcome back to the moon board. So we're going to talk a bit about the European Service Module and the Orion Crew Module. So as we know, these two systems have been working in tandem for a really long time, and that extends beyond just this Artemis 1 test flight for the past 26 days. So back in 2019 was when they were first integrated and pieced together. In 2020 was when they were fully assembled, including the solar panels and the protective fairings that protected them during launch. And then they were finally attached to the launch abort system and made it on top of SLS in October of 2021, prior to, of course, launch on November 16th, just 26 days ago. So we know that one of the primary test objectives of this mission is to make sure that this heat shield at the bottom of the crew module is able to safely bring our astronauts home from deep space. Now, for reference, when we bring astronauts home from the International Space Station, they're coming in at about 17,000 miles per hour. But today, Orion is coming in at 25,000 miles per hour. So we're coming in way hotter, way faster than we have done before. So we need some new heat shield technology. And we also need some additional hardware in order to slow us down and make that really happen. So let's talk about what that looks like. So this forward segment of the Orion Crew Module is called the forward bay cover. And this section is actually designed to completely be pulled off by 3 parachutes. So we have 3 parachutes that's going to pull that off. We have 2 drogue parachutes that are going to come out after that to slow us down a bit. We have 3 pilot parachutes that are going to pull our mains out. And then the stars of the show are 3 main parachutes that measure up to 116 feet in diameter each. So that gives us 11 parachutes that it takes to get us safely back home. So now that we know a little bit about what that hardware looks like, we can take a look at what that journey actually looked like. So as we know, we had a 7-day return transit, and as we approached the Earth, the service module and the crew module separated from one another, and the service module is going to burn up in the atmosphere above the Pacific Ocean. As that happens, the Orion Crew Module is going to use its reaction control thrusters to do a 180 flip and point that heat shield towards the atmosphere as we target re-entry. So a really important phase here is entry interface. This is at an altitude of about 400,000 feet, and this is where we define a lot of our entry conditions, such as the flight path angle and the velocity. Now this is really important because if you come in at too shallow of an angle, you may bounce right off the atmosphere and not even re-enter. But if you come in too steeply, you're going to experience forces that are beyond the design of your spacecraft. So what we're going to do today is actually toe the line and do a nominal skip maneuver where we're actually going to bounce off once that allows us to have a steeper reentry, and that actually increases the heating, allowing us to really test the capability of that heat shield. And we will also be minimizing the G loading, which leads to a softer ride for the Moonican and in the future for our Artemis astronauts. Now, once we do that, the atmosphere is going to slow us down pretty significantly, but we'll still be going over 300 miles per hour. And then we will slow down to 20 miles per hour after that sequence of 11 parachute deployments. Now, once we splash down west of California, we will have these red inflatables that will make sure that no matter what orientation we hit the water at, we will be right side up. And then the USS Portland is going to recover the capsule and bring it back to the U.S. Naval Station in San Diego. Now, there's a really large team comprised of U.S. Navy, Air Force, NASA, contractors who worked really hard to prepare for today. So I am super excited to see them welcome Orion home. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. We are coming up on the critical stuff leading up to Orion's return to Earth and its splashdown in the Pacific, just 7 minutes away now from crew module, service module separation. That European service module has worked like a champ throughout the course of the mission. The service module, which of course housed the solar arrays and all of the other propulsive functioning for Orion throughout the course of the mission, has been monitored in the European Service Module Control Room in Noordwijk in the Netherlands, where that team of flight controllers is eagerly awaiting the completion of the service module's work just a few minutes from now, when it will pyrotechnically separate from the crew module, leaving the crew module on its own. Entry interface is scheduled just 26 minutes from now. We'll be receiving reports from Flight Director Judd Freeling and his team of flight controllers throughout Orion's descent back into the Earth's atmosphere and through all of the parachute deployment sequence events leading up to splashdown that is scheduled at 11:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Central Time, 9:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Pacific Time. One thing worth noting is once Orion splashes down in the Pacific, it will stabilize in one of two positions, either pointed up, which is called Stable 1, or pointed down in Stable 2. The crew module uprighting system, known as the CMUS, deploys a series of 5 bright orange helium-filled bags on the top of the capsule that will either flip Orion right side up or keep it right side up in its Stable 1 position. Those 5 bags are packed in hard containers and installed atop the capsule inside the structural gussets between the parachutes and other equipment. They're inflated with helium gas that is stored in pressure vessels located close by the bags. Each bag has its own independent inflation system. The CMUS, or crew module uprighting system, initiates after landing and opens up a valve for helium to flow into those uprighting bags. It is considered, at least operational, that we have 4 out of those 5 bags to inflate to maintain a Stable 1 configuration for Orion to enable Navy divers to approach the vehicle. One of the first things that they'll be looking for is any leakage of toxic gas or toxic fuel from the vehicle. Assuming there is no such leak and that Orion appears to be in good shape, then they'll begin the methodical process of approaching the vehicle with other personnel and other Navy assets in order to begin the securing of Orion on the ocean for its towing back into the well deck of the USS Portland. We're under 4 minutes now until the crew module and service module separate from one another. We'll be standing by for all of that. You can see in this telemetry-driven animation that Orion is currently traveling just under 17,000 miles an hour, just under 4,000 miles away from Earth, and a hefty 254,000 miles from the moon, which of course was its target, in distant retrograde orbit, flying around the moon for its outbound powered flyby at the beginning of the mission to move to a distance of some 268,000 miles away from Earth, farther than any human-rated spacecraft designed to return to Earth had ever been designed to do, surpassing the distance record established 52 years ago during the Apollo 13 mission. Here in Mission Control, the flight dynamics folks and the guidance, navigation, and control folks have put up a graphic which is essentially the ground track for Orion as it will make its way across the southern Indian Ocean, passing the northwest coast of Australia en route to its ultimate trajectory that will carry it across the Pacific. It will be moving from south to north across the Pacific Ocean to the splashdown zone, almost a direct straight line towards the point of splashdown, which will be west of Baja California. Now just under 2 minutes until crew module, service module separation. Now just 1 minute away from crew module, service module separation. We'll be standing by for confirmation of that from the mechanical systems officer here at Mission Control. "30 seconds until separation. This will come at an altitude of 3,200 statute miles. "10 seconds until set. We have confirmation of separation. Orion flying on its own. Again, the separation occurred right on time at 11 a.m. and 11 seconds Central Time, with Orion 3,200 statute miles away from Earth. The service module, the European service module, has done its job. So with Orion flying on its own, we're about 18 and a half minutes away now from the point of entry interface. where Orion will be put through its paces. This is where the heat shield will begin to feel the effects of peak heating of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the heat shield, and the beginning of 2 blackout periods where the plasma around the vehicle will build up such that it will block data and communications between mission control and the spacecraft itself. Orion continues to fly smoothly on, all of its systems in excellent shape. Less than 17 minutes until entry interface. And the crew module raise burn that we thought was not going to be needed is being conducted. Just basically a fine-tuning of the orientation and the angle, a 16-second firing of the thrusters, and a good burn reported, 8.12 feet per second in a change in velocity. So the raise burn was executed. That will further fine-tune Orion's path at the proper azimuth or orientation where the heat shield is at its optimum angle to begin the repulsion of the heat that will build up around the heat shield at the time that we begin entry interface just about 15.5 minutes from now. So the crew module service module separation went off as planned. The raise maneuver was executed at 11:03 and 41 seconds Central Time. Again, the raise maneuver was executed. Orion now flying at the proper orientation for entry interface into the Earth's atmosphere. Entry interface is scheduled at 11:20 and 14 seconds a.m. Central Time at an altitude of 400,000 feet. At that point, Orion will be traveling 24,464 miles an hour with a range to splashdown of 3,659 statute miles. Flight controllers reporting a solid lock with the tracking and data relay satellite system, receiving data that's being processed through the TDRS network. Just a reminder that after we pass into the Earth's atmosphere, at the speed at which we're going and with the temperatures expected to build up very quickly for peak heating around the heat shield of Orion, we will begin the first of 2 blackout periods, the first of which is scheduled to begin at 11:20 and 16 seconds a.m. Central Time and will last about 4 minutes and 48 seconds. At that time, entry guidance, which has been stored on board, pre-programmed commanding for Orion to continue to point its way toward the splashdown zone, will take over. The first blackout period should end around 11:25 and 4 seconds Central Time. That will set the stage for the skip entry, basically the maneuver that will enable Orion to dip into the Earth's atmosphere and skip back out of the Earth's atmosphere and dip back into the Earth's atmosphere like a rock, a flat rock on a pond. That will continue to dissipate energy and heat on the spacecraft. and is a maneuver that data will be gathered for to try to bring in multiple splashdown sites for crewed missions in the future. The second of the two blackout periods is scheduled to begin at 11:29 and 3 seconds a.m. Central Time, and that will last for about 2 minutes and 50 seconds till about 11:31 and change. That'll be the final blackout period, after which we should lock up solidly for the remaining 8 minutes or so until splashdown. This is Mission Control Houston, 12 minutes away from entry interface. Everything is going by the book so far here in Mission Control, very quiet on the loops. Entry Flight Director Judd Freeling and his team of flight controllers watching carefully over their data as they oversee the arrival of Orion for its splashdown site west of Baja, California. Time to splashdown 31 minutes. Less than 11 minutes now until entry interface. During the period of the two blackouts, and even after we have emerged from the second of the two blackouts, Orion, through a series of pre-programmed commands stored on board, will conduct a series of role reversals. This is very much like space shuttles conducted during their entries back to Earth, where it will roll to the left and then back to the right, banking roll reversals that will bleed off excess energy, excess inertia, and speed, and control the thermal characteristics of the vehicle as it heads towards its subsonic point, where it will go under Mach 1. It will go subsonic at about 11:34 and 55 seconds a.m. Central Time, some 5 minutes before splashdown. If everything goes as planned, Orion will reach an altitude of 40,000 feet at 11:35 a.m. Central Time, just about a minute before forward bay cover chute deploy begins. The series of 11 chutes, 3 that will pull the forward bay cover off of the top of the crew module. That'll be followed by the deployment of the drogue chutes, and then the 3 large main parachutes, 3 orange and white parachutes. That'll be the moment we'll be waiting for. Orion now 28.5 minutes until splashdown. Orion is approaching the northwest coast of Australia. 27.5 minutes until splashdown. We're just 8 minutes away from the point at which Orion will dip into the Earth's atmosphere and begin what basically is a hellish entry, where temperatures around the spacecraft will raise to about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's half as hot as the outer surface of the sun. And correction, Orion is actually traveling over the South Pacific at the moment, moving from south to north. Just 7.5 minutes until entry interface. And this view from a camera inside the cabin of Orion, this doesn't look like much at the moment, but it will soon when it shows the forward bay cover jettisoning and the initiation of the parachute deployment system. Entry interface less than 6.5 minutes from now. Just to recap, the crew module, the Orion crew module, separated from the European service module about 14.5 minutes ago, right on target as it was planned, and a short raise maneuver, a 16-second firing of Orion's thrusters, oriented the vehicle, raising it just a tad so that its heat shield was at the proper orientation in the direction of travel, to begin entry interface in about 5 minutes at an altitude of 400,000 feet above the Earth. Orion is making its way south to north across the Pacific Ocean. Currently traveling at 23,000 miles an hour. We're about 5 minutes away from entering the first of the two blackout periods, which will last about 4 minutes and 48 seconds. A journey that began with the power of the launch of the Space Launch System 25.5 days ago, about to reach its final minutes in the searing heat of reentry, where temperatures around Orion will build up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Just under 4 minutes until entry interface. Once again, at entry interface, which we will reach about 3 minutes from now, Orion will be at an altitude of 400,000 feet, traveling just under 25,000 miles an hour, with a range to splashdown of 3,659 statute miles. Within seconds after reaching entry interface, we'll begin the first of the 2 blackout periods that will last just under 5 minutes, about 4 minutes and 48 seconds. And here's the ground track for Orion as it passes well to the west of South America. We're just 1 minute 44 seconds away from entry interface, moving from south to north to its splashdown target west of Baja California. Just 1 minute away from entry interface. And this view from the cabin camera, looking out of the upper hatch of Orion, you can see the limb of the Earth. We're going to be losing all of the data here shortly once we enter into the Earth's atmosphere and begin the first of the 2 blackout periods. Standing by for entry interface and the first of the 2 blackout periods. We are now in the entry phase. Entry interface has begun. Entry interface at 400,000 feet. Orion traveling just under 25,000 miles an hour. We are now in the entry phase